Take your questions. As you know, the special counsel released his findings today about their look into my handling of classified documents. I was pleased to see he reached a firm conclusion that no charges should be brought against me in this case. This was an exhaustive investigation going back more than 40 years, even into the 1970s when I was still a new United States Senator. The special counsel acknowledged I cooperated completely. I did not throw up any roadblocks. I sought no delays. In fact, I was so determined to give the special counsel what he needed, I went forward with a 5-hour in-person interview over 2 days on October the 8th and 9th of last year, even though Israel had just been attacked by Hamas on the 7th and I was very occupied. It was in the middle of handling an international crisis. I was especially pleased to see special counsel make clear the stark distinction and difference between this case and Mr. Trump's case. Special counsel wrote, and I quote, "Several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear," continuing to quote, "Most notably, after given multiple chances to return classified documents to avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, he went on to say Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his home, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation," end of quote. I've seen the headlines since the report was released about my willful retention of documents. These assertions are not only misleading, they're just plain wrong. On page 215, if you had a chance, I know it's a thick document. On page 215, the report of the special counsel found the exact opposite. Here's what he wrote. "There is in fact a shortage of evidence that I willfully retained classified materials related to Afghanistan." On page 12, the special counsel also wrote for another document, "The decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents. The evidence said I did not willfully retain these documents. In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of... Every Memorial Day we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or passed away. Simple truth is I sat for a 5-hour interview over 2 days of events going back 40 years. At the same time I was managing an international crisis, their task was to make a decision about whether to move forward with charges in this case. That's their decision to make. That's the counsel's decision to make. That's his job. And they decided not to move forward. For any extraneous commentary, they don't know what they're talking about. It has no place in this report. The bottom line is the matter is now closed. I'm going to continue what I've always focused on, my job of being President of the United States of America. Now, thank you, and I'll take some questions.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's
How
totally
bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
Do you feel your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory has not gotten. My memory is fine. My memory. Take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Mr. President. Voters have concerns about your age. How are you going to assuage them? And do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your age?
Only by some of you.
Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr.
You were
President.
clear of criminal liability today. Do you take responsibility for at least being careless with classified material?
I take responsibility for not having seen exactly what my staff was doing. It goes in and points out things that appeared in my garage, things that came out of my home, things that were moved not by me, but my staff.
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, "Watch me." Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They express concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer
Because
to
I'm the
that
most
question?
qualified person in this country to be president of the United States and finish the job I started.
Do you believe that, Mr. President, why are you refusing the names of world leaders?
I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter.
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
But the
What-
special counsel said-
Well, no, I did not say that.
Okay.
He did not say that.
But Mr. President, what
Let me answer your question. The fact of the matter is, what I didn't want repeated, I didn't want him to know, and I didn't read it to him, was I had written a long memorandum to President Obama why we should not be in Afghanistan. And I was of multiple pages. And so what I was referring to, I said classified. I should have said should be private because it was a contact between the president and the vice president as to what was going on. That's what he's referring to. It was not classified information in that document. That was not classified.
You called on me. When you look back at this incident, is there anything you would do differently now? And do you think that a special prosecutor should have been appointed in the first place in both of these cases?
First of all, what I would have done is oversee the transfer of the material that was in my office, in my offices. I should have done that. If I go back on, I didn't have the responsibility to that. That was my staff was supposed to do that, and they referenced that in the report. And my staff did not do it in the way that, for example, I didn't know how half the boxes got in my garage until I found out staff gathered them up, put them together, and took them to the garage in my home. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. It was in my house. It wasn't out in Mar-a-Lago in a public place and none of it was high classified. Didn't have any of that red stuff on it. You know what I mean? Around the corners? None of that. And so I wish I had paid more attention to how the documents were being moved and where. I thought they were being moved to the archives. I thought all of it was being moved. That's what I thought. Now, what was the last part of your question?
Whether a special counsel should have been appointed in this case and in the case of your rival president, former president?
I think a special counsel should have been appointed. And the reason I think a special counsel should have been appointed is because I did not want to be in a position that they looked at Trump and weren't going to look at me, just like they looked at the vice president. And the fact is they made a firm conclusion. I did not break the law, period. Thank you all very, very much. The hostage negotiation. I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. There are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying. And it's got to stop, number one. Number two, I was also in the position that I'm the guy that made the case that we have to do much more to increase the amount of material going in, including fuel, including other items. I've been on the phone with the Qataris, I've been on the phone with the Egyptians, I've been on the phone with the Saudis to get as much aid as we possibly can into Gaza. There are innocent people, innocent women and children who are also in badly need of help. And so that's what we're pushing. And I'm pushing very hard now to deal with this hostage ceasefire because, I've been working tirelessly in this deal. How can I say this without revealing it? To lead to a sustained pause in the fighting, in the actions taking place in the Gaza Strip. And because I think if we can get the delay for that, the initial delay, I think that we would be able to extend that so that we could increase the prospect that this fighting in Gaza changes. There's also negotiations. You may recall, at the very beginning, right before Hamas attacked, I was in contact with the Saudis and others to work out a deal where they would recognize Israel's right to exist, make them part of the Middle East and recognize them fully in return for certain things that the United States would commit to do. And the commitment that we were proposing to do related to two items. I'm not going to go in detail, but one of them was to deal with the protection against their arch enemy to the northwest, northeast, I should say. The second one, by providing ammunition and material for them to defend themselves. Coincidentally, that's the time frame when this broke out. I have no proof what I'm about to say, but it's not unreasonable to suspect that the Hamas understood what was about to take place and wanted to break it up before it happened.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to need everybody to hold for a moment.
So that was the President of the United States reeling after a special counsel report found him to have diminished capacities, found him to have willfully retained classified documents in multiple locations that were insecure, putting our national security at risk, but did not choose to bring charges because of those diminished capacities and thought he would appear to be an elderly man with memory issues in front of a sympathetic jury. President forced to call a hasty press conference, which he never does at this hour, about 10 minutes late to the press conference, seething with anger at one point at the special counsel for suggesting that he didn't remember when his son Beau died. The special counsel saying at one point he did not remember when he was vice president, lashing out at our very own Peter Doocy, lashing out at several reporters there, and then forced to walk out of the room. Let's now bring in Kayleigh McEnany, former White House press secretary. Kayleigh, have you ever seen anything like that where the President of the United States is having a hard time struggling to convince not only the press but the American people that he's mentally sharp enough to continue to execute the duties of the presidency?
No, we just saw an unmitigated disaster play out before our very eyes. We just watched a wounded political animal hobble to a podium and react with defensiveness, with anger. And you know it's bad, Jesse, when you have the White House press corps. They are essentially an extension of the Joe Biden press and communications team. When they are shouting at him, asking repeatedly, "Are you going to step aside, Mr. President?" The CNN correspondent asking that. When NBC of all places, writes a headline, "A nightmare. Special counsel report triggers panic among Democrats." And when you have a president who for 45 minutes announces a press conference with no topic, giving the world 45 minutes to speculate Is he stepping aside? What would life be like under a President Kamala Harris? For 45 minutes, the nation got to feel that panic, and I don't think they will forget it come November.
Yeah, we were upstairs thinking whether he was going to announce that he wasn't running for re-election and what the implications in terms of national security would be. I mean, he's already jeopardized national security and then lied about it to the press just now, saying he never willfully retained these classified documents, did not take any responsibility for it, blamed the press when in fact the special counsel said that he packed some of these boxes. And he's on tape acknowledging, oh yeah, I've got classified documents down there. And then when Peter Doocy says, you know, you have issues with your memory, he goes, my memory is so bad I let you speak. And that doesn't even make any sense, Kayleigh.
It makes no sense. I believe that one day we will discover that we were all played in what was the biggest presidential cover-up in recent memory. I mean, Jesse, think of the lengths that this team around him has had to go to create an eggshell environment that has kept the American people out. His lawyers wrote to the special counsel, please take out the details about his memory. Jill Biden has to escort him off the stage. Karine Jean-Pierre yells ad hominem attacks at Peter Doocy when he asks questions about age. Tonight, the White House communications director said, oh, the interview just came one day after October 7th, as if that's an excuse. His campaign says they bring up his age, the press does, to distract from the booming economy. These are all ploys to deceive the American people. One day we will discover the cover-up and how greatly at risk we were for this man being in charge.
Well, today we found out that there has been a cover-up, and they certified everything that we have all seen with our very own eyes, that he just does not have what it takes to be commander-in-chief. Kayleigh, thank you so much. Let's bring in Fox News contributor Mark Thiessen. Mark, I don't think I've ever witnessed anything like that. The anger, the defensiveness, the dishonesty, the inability to communicate any sort of competence or accountability. His own administration said he couldn't be held accountable. In a court of law, they'd take pity on him, a jury.
No, exactly right. Like we're now beyond concern about whether Joe Biden can serve a second term. We should be concerned about whether he could finish serving his first. And this press conference made it worse. I mean, first of all, he just referred to the president of Egypt, President Sisi, as the president of Mexico in that press conference just then. So he couldn't remember Hamas. In the last week, he couldn't remember who Hamas were. He described a conversation with a long dead French president. He described his conversation with a dead German chancellor about the January 6th attack, who died 4 years before the attack happened. And he now has described his conversations with President Sisi of Mexico. That's what we just witnessed. He said during that press conference that during the crisis, just a couple of days after the attacks in the Middle East, the October 7th attacks, he took the time to have, in the middle of a crisis, to have a 5-hour interview. Let me read to you how the special counsel described that interview. In his interview in our office, Mr. Biden's memory was worse. He did not remember when he was vice president, forgetting the day of the interview when his term ended. And on the second day of the interview when his term began, he did not remember, even within several years, when his son Beau died. His memory appeared hazy when describing the Afghanistan debate that was once so important to him. He described General Eikenberry, who was his ally, as someone who he disagreed with. And then it said that they found that the reason they didn't go to a jury and charge him, couldn't charge him, is because his diminished faculties and faulty memory he showed in our interview with him. That is the state of Joe Biden's mental capacity when he was handling the October 7th attacks. In the middle of that, what's so? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we expected someone to come down into the Oval Office and say, Joe, it's over. And say, we can't have you run for re-election just for the sake of the country, for the sake of the safety of the nation. Aren't there any wise old hands to come down and deliver that message to the president? Because this is a dangerous world. And we've now had a conclusion by his own administration that he's not equipped, mentally, physically equipped to handle the duties of the presidency. This makes everybody feel unsafe.
100%. Look, here's the thing. 76% of Americans say that he's too old to serve a second term, and that's based on his public utterances. We have limited view into his mental capacity because we just see him stumble in press conferences, make a mistake on the world stage. But we all sit and wonder, well, what's he like behind closed doors if he's this bad in public? And we didn't know. And what the special counsel has done has pulled back the veil and shown us what he's like in a 5-hour interview. Well, if he's having that much trouble having a conversation, remembering facts, following trains of thought in his meetings with Justice Department lawyers, what are his meetings with world leaders like? What are his meetings with his national security advisors like? You know, he told us after the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal that no one told him to leave 2,500 troops as a residual force. And then his military commanders testified that they had all told him that we needed to leave 2,500 troops behind in Afghanistan. Was he lying, or did he actually not know?
Well, that's where we are, Mark. We are at the point where we don't know if he's telling the truth or he doesn't remember. And if you read the report from her, he says that over and over and over again, where the president doesn't really know or can't remember, and then later just says, yeah, I wanted to keep these documents for my book. And you can't have it both ways. You can't have it where he's not going to remember enough, so you can't put him on trial. But if you're going to say, well, he actually knows everything, well, what are you talking about? He's just said he can't remember. None of it makes any sense. And this might be the worst day of his presidency. Maybe not as bad as the Afghanistan day. This might be the worst. Let's now bring in former White House senior advisor Stephen Miller. Stephen, you were there in the White House when the press, everybody was salivating over the 25th Amendment. What are your thoughts on that now?
Well, of course, President Trump is the sharpest person to occupy the Oval Office in our lifetimes, and I can say that from intimate experience working in the West Wing every single day of the presidency. But let's talk about what happened today and how stunning this is. The Department of Justice effectively said that Joe Biden is less mentally fit and capable than the average inmate in San Quentin. That you could go to any federal prison in the country, pick any random inmate, drug dealer, murderer, anybody there, and they will be more mentally capable than the President of the United States of America. It is a very low bar to be ruled mentally fit for trial. That very low bar, the most retirees in most retirement communities all across the country can meet, the President of the United States does not meet. When they talk about diminished faculties, those are phrases you hear in a hospice care setting when they're explaining to the children of the patient why grandpa is biting the care workers. That's how bad this is, Jesse. That's the President of the United States. And he certainly, as Mark said, did not allay any concerns when he thinks the President of Egypt is the President of Mexico. He went on TV live tonight and talked about opening up humanitarian gateways from Mexico to the Gaza Strip. Do you know how demented and deranged that sounds? A man shouted angrily at reporters, accosted them, screamed at them, and then he said, oh, let's talk about the President of Mexico, El Sisi, and our plan for Gaza relief. This is a PR catastrophe for the White House, but it is a national security catastrophe, Jesse, for the United States of America.
You're right, and then afterwards, when he was speaking to Democrats this afternoon after this thing dropped, he said, I was elected to be the president for red states and green states. I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah,
I think it's red states
Dr. Seuss line.
and blue states. But go back to the picture that we're going to show now. Look at the garage. This is the President of the United States garage, Stephen Miller. This is where he was keeping information about U.S. weapons capabilities, foreign intelligence, military secrets. There it is, next to a lamp with duct tape wrapped around it and a shoebox. The FBI said that box was so dilapidated and crumbled that they couldn't even pick it up. They had to take the classified documents and put it in another box. Now, this is a garage that Hunter's in and out of with Jackie Bao, who's tied to Chinese intelligence. This is where the garage doors open. They're going on a joyride in the Corvette. Now, you take this and look at Donald Trump, where his documents were. They were locked up in a secure facility. Boxes had tops on them, guarded by Secret Service, on an estate on an island. Now, the media went crazy when those images came out. How can you continue to go forward with this document prosecution on the Trump side after what we've witnessed here with this off-ramp that the special counsel has given Joe Biden, who had a garage that looked like my great-grandfather's after a rummage sale?
Well, yes, let's be very clear that the Department of Justice, the report they wrote, was an attempt to get Joe Biden completely scot-free off of the documents case while they are persecuting Donald Trump. Those pictures you showed are the least secure handling and storing of classified information I've ever seen in my life. Donald Trump stored the records based on consultation with the Department of Justice and the National Archives. Records that he, as president, has the absolute right to maintain, to control, to declassify, that is an unmitigated right of the President of the United States. Joe Biden had no such right. Joe Biden was vice president, not president. He was senator, not president, when he stole these records, when he purloined these records. And yet he is not being prosecuted. And we know why he's not being prosecuted. Because the system is rigged, Jesse. It's rigged in the same way that Black Lives Matter can torch buildings and kill people and ruin lives, but pro-life protesters, they get thrown in the slammer. It's rigged because if you are on the right team, if you're on the Democrat team, you can commit any crime and you will be shielded. And if you're on the wrong team, you're the Republican team, and certainly for Donald Trump, no matter how innocent you are, you will be railroaded. Joe Biden belongs in prison. He willfully retained and disclosed classified information, and he has absolutely no right to retain those records because he was not the President of the United States.
Well, he's lying right to the American people about disclosing classified information. The report says he shared classified information with his ghostwriter for the book. And then when he was asked about it, he said it wasn't true and told some crazy story about Afghanistan. And now, knowing this whole time, he's been sitting on this dusty, disheveled box of classified documents in his garage and all over Chinatown and Penn Biden Center. He was green-lighting his Justice Department to go raid Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Think about how diabolical that is.
Well, because we don't live in a free country anymore. We don't live in a democracy anymore. We live in a country where there's a ruling party, a ruling regime, ruling power centers, and they decide who goes to jail and who is innocent. Look, Hunter Biden had unfettered access to these documents in this area. A drug addict had unfettered access. This is the same time as the Biden family is making millions and millions of dollars in shady foreign dealings. How easy would it have been for any number of foreign governments to obtain access to this garage? How often was the garage open? How often were these facilities unsecured? This is a complete and total violation of our nation's most essential secrets. But at the end of the day, this is the same government that has a wide open border and traffics in children. Is the same government that censors our speech illegally. It's the same government that allows people to vote without any verification, and it's the same government trying to throw Donald Trump in jail because he's the leader of the opposition party. They don't care about the rules. They care about power, Jesse.
Yeah, you got a wide open garage and border. It looks like a mess on both fronts. Stephen, thank you so much. Let's now bring in Dana Perino, who we have on the phone.